and Junior for our weekly Bible study. And we are in the book of Leviticus, which is the very middle of the Torah or Pentateuch, the very middle book. It is also the shortest book, but it's the one that most people, at least among Christians, find to be boring and repetitive and somehow not seeming to reflect life as we know it in this world. And that's okay. It was life as they knew it at the time it was being passed down orally and ultimately written down. It proves to be a much more interesting book than my past experiences have been. The scene is set at Mount Sinai, and it begins purportedly exactly 1 year after the Israelites departed from Egypt, and immediately following Moses' construction of the tent of meeting and its indwelling by God at the end of the book of Exodus in chapter 40. And as we said before, it is a priestly source. It's kind of a priest's manual. And the plot continues from this book into Numbers right when Leviticus ends. And we will be looking at Numbers next in a couple of meetings down the road. Yeah, what page are you doing? Page 5 of this handout. I'm going to be working back and forth, so it may be hard to follow me on the handout. And we will talk a little bit about Numbers when we finish Leviticus. But today we were going to focus on the two places that there is a short narrative within the book of Leviticus, because these two little short passages of narratives seem to be crucial for understanding the whole book. Robert Alter says they provide the theological foundation really for the rest of the book. And they're really kind of awful stories. They really are awful. And it sounds like such a mean, arbitrary God in some ways. But remember from last time, we said that Alter said that the major themes were divide and separate, to be set apart. And this division is a theme that shows up from Genesis forward, and that there were 4 elements for protecting those boundaries, that division: fire, blood, oil, and water, all had a special symbolism in the story. So we'll go back and we'll go back to the beginning of this handout. One of the stories is in chapter 10, beginning on page 3. And it's so short, I'm just going to read it to you. But Nadab and Abihu, sons of Aaron, each took his censer put fire in it, laid incense on it, and offered unauthorized fire. Now, altar translates that as alien fire. Before Adonai, something he had not ordered them to do. At this, fire came forth from the presence of Adonai and consumed them, so that they died in the presence of Adonai. Moses said to Aaron, "This is what Adonai said. Through those who are near me, I will be consecrated, and before all the people, I will be glorified." Aaron kept silent. Moses called Mishael and Elzaphan, sons of Uzziel, Aaron's uncle, and told them, "Come here and carry your cousins away from in front of the sanctuary to a place outside the camp." See the division again, the separation. They approached and carried them in their tunics out of the camp, for she had said. So let's look at that passage a little bit and see what the commentators make of this. This was one in which Robert Alter felt was key to understanding theologically what's going on. And he says, Nadab and Abihu bring forth an alien fire. And fire is a principal means of making a sacrifice, but it can be a contaminant if it's not authorized, if it's brought in from some outside source. So these two priests were punished for their invasive contamination. And this appears to be, if you look at the JPS translation and interpretation, the unauthorized fire, they say, refers to the incense itself. It could be translated as an alien incense offering by fire. So they put something in which contaminates the fire, making it an alien fire. So that implies a strange,
which is impure,
it's not pure.
because everything was measured by God when Moses had to create the tabernacle. And every spicy, everything that needs to be added in what you ever offered has to the specific things to make the right frankincense.
You had to use what they asked you to use. And in the other handout you had, there was a section where I listed several of the combinations of items that were allowed. Let's see if I can find it. On page 5, it lists 5 different offerings, their names. And you see, for example, Mencha was an offering of grain mixed with oil and frankincense. Part was burned on the altar, and the priest consumed the remainder. So there were very specific instructions of what was allowed and what was not allowed. And so in this case, they brought in something invasive and contaminating and then they were consumed by the fire because they are no longer holy. The priest had to be pure himself at the time of making the offering. Then Aaron and his surviving sons are warned about this kind of contamination. And after that burning occurs, they're warned not to come into the sanctuary drunk. So priestly writers view an authorized ritual as one that has very defined things that you may do or not do. And Alter says he thinks this was in contrast to the pagan rituals of that time that focused on ecstatic orgy, that you would be out of your mind, you could be drunk, you could be out of your mind, you could be sexually aroused, you could be whatever. And this authorized ritual was the opposite of that. Leviticus is framed to implement a perpetual ideology of separation of the people from the culture and from contaminants, if you will. So the JPS commentary says it implied a kind of strangeness, not that it was not something that had been specifically ordained, and it maybe penetrated too far into sacred space, that the contamination could not be violated the sacred space, if you will. And they note that in the priestly source, through those near to me, I show myself holy. The duly consecrated priests are near to God, and they therefore enter the chambers under the laws that are given. So then let's look at the second passage, which carries on the theme of separation and following the priestly procedures. Also, this comes in chapter 24, beginning on page 4. There was a man who was the son of a woman of Israel and an Egyptian father. He went out among the people of Israel, and the son of a woman of Israel had a fight. Alter translates that as they brawled, so violent altercation. He had a fight or a brawl in the camp with a man of Israel, in the course of which the son of a woman of Israel uttered the name Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh in a curse. So they brought him to Moses. His mother's name was Shlomit, the daughter of Berghe, of the tribe of Dan. They put him under guard until Adonai would tell them what to do. Adonai said to Moses, "Take the man who cursed outside the camp. Have everyone who heard him lay their hands on his head, and have the entire community stone him. Then tell the people of Israel, whoever curses his God will bear the consequences of his sin." and whoever blasphemes the name of Adonai must be put to death. The entire community must stone him. The foreigner, as well as the citizen, is to be put to death if he blasphemes the name of Adonai. And that seems to refer to non-Jews who might live in the same community, that they were held to the same standards as Jews in this regard. The entire community must stone him. The foreigner, as well as the citizen, is to be put to death if he blasphemes the name. Now, going back and taking a look at what Alter says about this passage, he says it was a brawl, and he says the same word, brawl, is used for two Hebrew men whom the young Moses rebuked in the book of Exodus. And the medieval commentator Berghe may have led him to claim any kind of or imaginary that the blasphemer was the son of the Egyptian taskmaster whom Moses killed on the day before he encountered the two brawling Israelites. So he connects them up in some way. But he invoked the name, and that is anticipating later the Hebrew usage of the name of Yahweh. But the writer has avoided using Yahweh. They use Adonai instead. That became fairly common to do that. And then the community being asked to lay their hands on his head, it was a symbol of sharing in the blood guilt with one another on the perpetrator's head. They all are agreeing to carry out this sentence. They're agreeing to confirm the guilt. And JPS says the whole community, including what were not strangers, but who were non-Israelites, along with the Israelites, had to maintain the religious character. Any act that would threaten the character of the community and its commitment to the sanctity of the separation that being an Israelite stood for, that you were accepting that God is separating you from the profane, from the contamination on any level of your life that you might care to think about, in the food and what you wear and where you sleep or who you sleep with. All of those things were in the set of rules that you find in Leviticus, and to at least some degree the non-Jews, non-Israelites in the same community had to follow those same rules. So it's kind of a harsh sounding conclusion that you curse with the name of God, or you use an unauthorized incense in the fire, and you're in the Holy of Holies, where you're not supposed to be but once a year, and you're supposed to have been purified before you go in there. And now you use an incense, which is a contaminant.
Yeah, because God, when God instructed Moses to prepare the perfume to create it,
Yeah,
he also said that it had to be exactly like that.
yeah,
And you cannot make your own for yourself,
yeah,
because if that happens, you will be cut off from the people.
yeah,
So that is what happened.
yeah,
They made it their own. See, they took the holiness from God away.
yeah,
And there's a Midrash story that when the high priest goes in, the Holy of Holies, they put a little cord on his ankle when he is, consumed by the fire of God because he is not holy. They can drag them out because when they go in, they're dead too. So, I mean, we have to have a better understanding what Moses is supposed to do with that, with the frankincense and all that. And when you not make it pure, it's now also the same. In our sacraments, in our altar making, it needs to be exact what it should be on the altar. See? What we do and we miss on the altar, it's fine, it's still valid, right?
we mess up all the time. And from our standpoint, we mess up. We've kind of broken the ritual, but none of us making those mistakes expects to be for fire to come down and to consume us, because
that cannot happen anymore because it's all fulfilled in Christ.
So we will get there. What Jesus does with all this. It's very important to understand the rules of food and of sacrifice and relationships and sexuality. You have to understand the importance of this separation and division and what it was to them. And it will make a lot more sense to understand those rules, which we'll specifically talk about some of the sexual rules next week, because they have gotten a bad rap. People have not understood them. And even in their time, people had different ideas about them then, I think, than they did later. Later, modern concepts were imposed on them and made them into something that they never were from the beginning. But this blasphemer in Christian sources is mentioned. He unexpectedly interrupts the divine revelation of the law, as did the previous incident with the alien fire. And no law had yet been given to address blasphemy at that time. This was a new understanding that they were developing. And there were further laws that then arose in response to that as time went on. Yeah.
So this is prior to their getting the 10 Commandments,
Prior to what?
the 10 Commandments.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, actually,
Because one of the,
the legend is that it all happened within 1 month. We, of course, don't believe that it all happened within 1 month.
You have first the 10 Commandments, and after that is the preparation where God instructs Moses to build the tabernacle.
Right.
With the exact elves and whatever.
Right.
And the exact, like I said, just the, what you call the copper wash tail was from copper, and that was the only thing that has no measure. And this is the grace of God that is immeasurable. It doesn't stop. So this is an image what God really created in a tabernacle to give to everyone, to, and it's all related, maybe to go further on that, in the symbolization of Christ yet to come. The whole tabernacle is symbolized in Christ.
Right.
So we're probably gonna go there, right?
Not right now.
Now, get excited.
What we're gonna do now is jump over to certain New Testament passages. And as I have mentioned, I think that with Jesus, something of a paradigm shift, which means that the whole concept around purity, cleanliness, separateness, divided. Jesus did something very different with that. And in Matthew 15, we have the Pharisees and scribes. This is on page 6 of your handout. Come to Jesus and they ask him, why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? They do not wash their hands before they eat. And he answered them, and why do you break the commandment of God for the sake of your tradition? For God said, honor your father and your mother, and whoever speaks evil of father or mother must surely die. And then he goes into how the scribes worked all this out in their own little mini rulings, if you will. But you say that whoever tells father or mother, whatever support you might have had from me is given to God, then that person need not honor the father. So, for the sake of your tradition, you make void the words of God. For the sake of your tradition, you make void the word of God. You hypocrites! Isaiah prophesied rightly about you when he said, this people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching human precepts as doctrine. You get that, boys and girls? Teaching human precepts as doctrines.
Mm-hmm.
Chew on that one for a while.
In our everyday
Holly,
life.
you had your hand up.
Yeah, what kind of support do they need? Whatever support you might have had from me is given to God. Do they mean?
It's their way of wiggling out of having to support their parents.
So financially?
Oh, it was from God. Whatever you got from me is from God, so we'll let God take care of you now. Bye-bye. May the Lord bless you. You starve to death or die alone. Ta-ta. Essentially what they were saying. So
It's also what James says in the New Testament. You know what to do. You know, it's your place not to sit in front, like the one who's wearing the golden ring and whatever. You need some places on the back, but also that you need to be, you know, you're not different than the ones who taking care for the friends. You need to take care for the ones who are in need. So this is what Jesus also said, take care of whatever your parents, or so I can say bye-bye.
he uses the concept that they rationalize their way out of what the law had clearly said, that you honor your father and your mother, which is pretty straightforward. And they were substituting their human rationalizations as doctrines that they would follow. So then, yeah. So then it gets even more complicated. Then he called the crowd to him and said to them, listen and understand. It is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but is what comes out of the mouth that defiles. And there's a parable there. We won't go through the fine details of that, but do read it. And he says, do you not see that whatever goes into the mouth enters the stomach and goes out through the sewer? And what comes out of the mouth proceeds from the heart. And this is what defiles. Out of the heart comes evil intentions, murder, adultery, fornication, theft, false witness, slander. These are what defile a person. But to eat with unwashed hands does not defile. Hand washing was a Pharisaic tradition, and that you ate in a state of purity,
Now, coming
but
back,
it was not in the Torah.
okay, well, if you do the rituals, it's there. And because that's why the Essenes, in on the Red Sea,
Yeah,
they have those baths.
yeah,
You go in, and also a female through a certain process.
right,
After that period, also they have to go in the bath to
right.
clean themselves completely. What I have a question when they ask the question, why do the apostles, the disciples, not to wash their hands?
Yeah,
So this is already what Jesus is living and you teaching.
he's already into a
See the
different way of
Yeah.
thinking about what is filthy, what is dirty, what is contaminated.
Exactly.
What is pure? And he's saying it comes from the heart and out of the mouth, and not what you eat. And it's what comes out of your heart. And all these offenses they list here: murder, adultery, fornication, theft, false witness, slander, all originate from evil intentions. And so let's jump to the next passage, Acts 10. Here we have the time in history where the Christian community is developing, and there are Gentiles and Jews together. And there was a whole big controversy of to what extent did the Gentiles have to accept Jewish laws, and to what extent could Jews associate with these Gentiles, even though they all were claiming to follow Jesus. So this is a new development in a new phase of early Christianity. And in Caesarea, there was a man named Cornelius, a centurion of the Italian cohort, as it was called. He was a devout man who feared God with all his household. He gave alms generously to the people and prayed constantly to God. And he had a vision. And God, an angel of God came to him, and he was in terror. And he said, your prayers and your alms have ascended as a memorial before God. Now send men to Joppa for a certain Simon, who is called Peter. He is lodging with Simon the tanner, whose house is by the seaside. So then the angel left. And Cornelius called 2 slaves and a devout soldier and sent them to go find this Peter. And about noon the following day, Peter was up on the roof praying by himself. And he fell into a trance, and heaven opened. And in his vision, there were all kinds of 4-footed creatures and reptiles and birds. And the voice said, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." And Peter said, "By no means, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is profane or unclean." And the voice came to him a second time, "What God has made clean must not call profane." And that happened 3 times. So then Peter was very puzzled by what he had seen, and Cornelius shows up. And they were asking their way. They'd been asking their way to Simon's house, and they stood out and called. And they were searching for him. And Peter was still thinking about what the Spirit said to him. And he said, the Spirit said, "Look, 3 men are searching for you. Go down and go with them without hesitation, for I have sent them." And then the centurion, Cornelius, spoke up, and Peter invited them in for food and lodging. Now think about this, because in that time of Jewish understanding, you didn't eat a meal with a non-Jew, and you didn't sleep in their house, and they didn't sleep in yours, and you didn't touch them, or you were contaminated. Think about that. We're back to contamination and separation again. But then the following day, Cornelius comes to Peter and falls down to worship Peter. And Peter says, "Get up, I'm only a man." And he talked to him, and there were other people who assembled. And he said, "You yourselves know it is unlawful for a Jew to associate with or to visit a Gentile. But God has shown me that I should not call anyone profane or unclean. So when I was sent, I came without objection." And then he asked, "Why did you send for me?" And Cornelius told about his vision of a man in dazzling clothes before him. His prayer had been answered, and his offerings to God were being remembered. So what is happening here is that there is a shift, a paradigm shift in what makes someone or something pure, clean, reserved, separate for God. And then the passage tells of Peter speaking to them. "I truly understand that God shows no partiality, but in every nation, Gentile or Jew, anyone who fears him and does what is right is acceptable to him." defilement is no longer an issue. It is no longer an issue between people. It is no longer an issue what you eat, if it's offered appropriately, and you thank God for providing that food, be it grain or fish or meat.
But I was in the contradiction that the Jews, that Peter was upset, and he got also criticized by Paul, that he was hanging out with the Jews, and then he was, already converted, and there was a mix of Peter to both, have the prophets of the Jews, and then the prophet also from his Christian life. And Paul criticized him on that, and then he got that vision where he clearly see that, now you can eat everything what is there on the market. You don't have to, it's okay. It's no uncleanness anymore. And that opens, of course, the whole broad understanding of the Leviticus law on the meals and all that, and the sacrifices that's done.
Well, they came to kind of a compromise in the early Christian community. Paul, was bringing in all these new Gentile believers, and Peter was in the original old school, if you will. And basically, Peter said, don't eat meat that was sacrificed in pagan temples, and follow Jewish law regarding relationships, and you can be at table with Jews. And later, Paul says something like, don't do something if it causes your brother to stumble. In other words, if you're doing something that you're kind of in their face, and it is something that is important to that other person.
Be a vegetarian then, eh?
Yeah, like vegetarian. Like vegetarian. We don't have to throw it in their face and just slobber all over our steak in front of them while they are eating their greens.
Just an example. That is what you
I think the word for that, Catholicism, is scandal.
What?
Scandal?
Scandal. If you scandalize someone, you're doing something that might cause them to stumble.
Yeah.
So we scandal.
Scandal. Yep. So,
Yeah, scandal is the good word there. Don't want to scandalize people who might not be on the same page with you. Use some wisdom, and general rules of, being hospitable to people who are either, quote, strangers, or who may come from different traditions. So this is the beginning of allowing the whole message that God is bringing in the Hebrew Bible, and as the Christian community is beginning, and at this point in time, they don't really have a canon, New Testament canon yet. It hasn't all been written. It's probably in scraps and pieces in different communities, and is over the next few decades pulled together into writing. But the story of the visions of Cornelius and of Peter, that the whole definition of what is holy, what is respect of God's holiness, was beginning to be looked at very, very differently. And we will see how that applies to some of the laws and things that we find in Leviticus, because even modern day Jews don't sacrifice anymore. They don't do that, but they do have very strong traditions around how food is handled and what kind of food
Kosher.
is okay to eat and how it must be prepared and how the animals must be killed. And you can't even use, you have to keep your dishes separate. I'm remembering my
Two
friend.
things, one for the milk products and one
Yeah.
for, don't mix it. It's like almost gluten free, right? You have to.
But it's interesting to me, and it's kind of a side note, that this tradition continues with the Jews.
Yeah,
It just gives you a real sense of ancientness, if
yes,
that's a word. I mean, just how, like, we look at our traditions maybe 3 generations back. They're looking at their traditions thousands
Yeah.
of years,
Yeah.
and that they continue.
right,
And I also find it really interesting in that the Jews, modern Jews, many of them, keep these traditions, but don't necessarily keep their religion. Exactly what they were
That's true.
talking about in Leviticus.
Yeah.
Jews and religious Jews.
Right.
Leslie has something.
Leslie?
No, I was agreeing. That's true. I do know Jews who are not religious would not call themselves believers, but who keep kosher. Because it is something about the 1,000-year-old tradition that they want to maintain for themselves and for their children and grandchildren.
It's very interesting to me that exactly what they were talking about in
Right,
Leviticus. Don't let these traditions become more important than worshiping your God.
right,
And yet that's exactly what has happened and what continues to happen for some people, not everybody.
right. Well, they also have,
They would say it's more important than worshiping your God. I don't think that they would say necessarily that the kosher laws are sacred. They're traditional, and tradition is really important to Jews.
Yes.
Really.
that's right.
you have to remember what we said before, that each rule or law was regarded as an interaction, a communication between God and a person. God gave the rule for whatever reason God did. The person follows it as a loving act with God. It was considered part of your worship to follow those rules.
Well, that's your side of the covenant, isn't it?
Right.
Yes.
We perhaps would do well to think about, that God is in his covenant with each of us individually or as a community, that following that covenant is an act of worship.
Mhm.
I really like that concept. It wasn't just following some abstract rule that had no reason or purpose. And we have to also remember, in that culture, many of these rules actually had life-saving value. I think the sexual rules had life-saving value. They probably had syphilis and chlamydia and all manner of sexual diseases that were rampant in some communities where anything goes, and the laws of separation were life-saving, and the laws of separating of the food very possibly was life-saving because there were certain foods that could carry diseases like pork and trichinosis was very rampant, I'm quite sure. And I don't know what the problem was with different kinds of seafood, but at any rate, I'm sure there were probably some health benefits from some of those rules that we really didn't understand in our time. Luca is making the rounds to greet everybody. He's our wonderful little Bible student. Now he's picked on Polly. He wants to meet Polly. And he's loved by Polly. And that's very good.
Okay, that's my turn in the sunshine. Moving on.
You missed the whole snug with Gary.
Well, Gary was earlier.
Yeah.
He was in his lap earlier. So he's making the round. So any other thoughts about this?
Yeah, well, not about that, but I have a thought. I have a question.
Okay,
I was watching that channel on TV where they talk about all different religions, everybody in the journey. And there was one about, it was a rabbi and his assistant rabbi, I guess. And they were talking about the talent and the ram's horn
yeah,
and the, what is it, the thing you put on the doorpost?
yeah,
Mezuzah.
mezuzah.
And the one other thing, anyway, I watched it for that reason because I found it stuff interesting. So anyhow, one of the other things they talked about, and this puzzled me, this is from Jeremiah. The days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the people of Israel and with the people of Judah. That was Jeremiah 31:31, and this 31:32. It will not be like the covenant I made with their ancestors when I took them by the hand to lead them out of Egypt, because they broke my covenant, though I was a husband to them. So when did they break it and how did they break it?
Over
This is
and
the
over,
same crowd we're talking about.
over and over.
When they came out of Egypt, there was a process to, to go to the promised land. They
Right,
start, like the Lamentations over and over. It was not okay. Then they start blaming Moses, and then the 10 Commandments. Then he came down, and then
didn't he hang in there?
and then after that, because it was still like we said in the study, that they worship me with their lips, but with their heart. That is in the book of Jeremiah too. And that was the wrong thing. There was such a strong disobedience from the people to God that he said to Jeremiah, say this and that. If they're not going to follow that, I'm going to bring them to exile. And then they did go to Babylon. And they were like 70 years,
Okay.
was prophesied by Jeremiah. So there was a year less, 69 years for exact, they were in Babylon. See? Because there was no repentance. They worshipped their idols more than they worshipped God, Yahweh. See?
Yeah.
They didn't even offer as it should be. See, it was all.
And we'll get to track with all that because we go through Jeremiah and
So Jeremiah could not marry, could not have kids. The only three things that he could not do. The thing was, why not? Because his life was to prophesy and to teach the Israelites how to become in worship with God again. And they ignored him because they were listening to the false prophets.
Oh, okay.
And they just condemned Jeremiah, and Jeremiah became very depressed, but through his suffering and all that, you see that Jeremiah became a servant to God very strongly. and was acknowledged by God very, very high, even through, as we suffer, our journey will be more stronger, because in our suffering, we become more humble. And for Jeremiah, was exactly the same. He knew that he was right in his saying. And so he saw his people going, and Jeremiah used symbols as a husband and a wife, as adultery, that they played adultery to God. They ruined their marriage. There was a divorce. So Jeremiah was using all that.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
So if we understand all, if we understand all that, for us, we will have a better understanding in our Christian life. That where God was seen as a God of punishment, no. God wanted to be honored. That's why that frankincense needs to be pure, because I am holy. And in the New Testament, in Hebrews, they say, I am holy and you should be holy. It's for us exactly the same.
But the God of the Jews was fierce. And look what he did. He burnt those two guys to a crisp for bringing, they broke the rules, so all right, they have to suffer. But he seems to be like that through the whole history of the Jews.
Because they were so disobedient all the time. It was only in Joshua, after Moses died and he could not enter the Holy Land. So Joshua came on, and through his whole life, the law by Joshua was kept. So very long, let me say 200 or 300 years, there was peace, because they obeyed the law. See? It's important to go piece by piece through all those books, and you will see how the Israelites are symbolizing our life in honoring God, in worshiping God, and disobeying God, and adultery. What is adultery? That's not only a divorce, it's adultery is neglecting the one you love. And for God was a high meaning in worshiping him alone. But they're worshiping the Baal. Yeah. They thought, okay, all those little statues, there was more toward them than offering the pure. And so the sons of Aaron were putting their incense. Yeah. So what happened? Boom, instead of up here. See, for us, it's also that say, God, I will make a heart, what was a heart of stone, make a heart of blood. And that came through Christ. We have the whole finishing part in the life of Christ.
But when God came around to us, to dealing with the Gentiles, he seems to have changed personalities. Now he's loving God.
And he was a loving God there too.
It was a covenant of love. It was a promise.
Yeah.
It was love. It just doesn't look touchy-feely, but it was love. He valued them more than other people. He chose them. He separated them, and he entered into the covenant. You will be my people, and I will be your God. There's not much more love than that.
Yeah.
More tough love.
But it's still hard for us to understand why he would smack them down and burn them up.
You think that we're not
And
smacked down?
I think we have to think about that.
Are we not smacked down sometimes?
Oh,
We also go,
Well,
and that's why is God named a God of long suffering. He keeps on going with us.
First, because I stubbed my toe, he hasn't struck me down in the fire.
Thank goodness.
Wow.
No, but
And
all suffering can be redemptive. The saints teach us this. All suffering can be redemptive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I have enjoyed this. We've hardly scratched the surface of it, but I would like to recommend a book. If you have a chance to if you get books on Amazon, if you get ebooks, David Gushee Gushee, has written a book about the whole gay situation. I'm trying to remember the exact title and I can't.
Go
So
to your.
Changing Our Mind? Is it called Changing Our Mind?
yes, but get the last edition. It went through three,
Okay,
and it is the cleanest, most succinct commentary on the scriptures that have been used in the whole controversy about gays that
Mhm.
I've seen. There are a lot of good books, and I will tell you about some of them. Some of them require a lot more work than this one. I do want to mention one thing before we go, and I'll repeat it each week. Yeti and I will be out of the country beginning May 31st, and we will miss 3 weeks of Bible study into mid-June. And then I will be back and we will have the Bible study when I return. But we decided that we couldn't really do it at 4 o'clock in the morning from Belgium. So so
From everything.
actually, Yeti wants to do it from 4 in the morning for the Sunshine Club.
That's not 4 in the morning. The sunshine club is on 11 in the morning. For me, it's
Isn't
not
it
8
4
o'clock in
o'clock
the
in the
evening.
morning? Oh, it's in the evening for
The
you.
sunshine club is on 11.
Okay, anyway, we will not have
American.
class in those 3 weeks, and we'll put that in writing so that people know. And we'll have some suggestions of some movies you can look at if you're interested.
Mhm.
Pray, somebody.
Thank you, Lord, for Midrash, for looking at scriptures and turning them every way and seeking to find the core truth of who you are and how we relate to you from our hearts out toward others, that we reach out to the world from a state of pure love, your love, and that we reach out to those around us in a caring, loving, respectful way where we know how to respect the boundaries that you've given us and that other people also need. Thank you for this time of sharing. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Rebecca, and
See you next time.
a new
Night,
rock
Rebecca.
was
Bye-bye.
played. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.